Welcome to the deep dive. We're taking a look today at something really foundational in astrophysics.
Yeah, something that helps us make sense of just the sheer variety of stars out there.
Exactly, the Hertzsprung-Russell diagram, the HR diagram.
Basically a map, right? Plotting how bright a star is, its luminosity against its temperature.
Or its color, which is tied to temperature, and it's been around a while. Independently cooked up around, what, 1910?
That's right, by Ejnar Hertzsprung in Denmark and Henry Norris Russell over in the U.S.
Russell, wasn't he also involved in quantum mechanics? LS coupling, that rings a bell?
It does indeed. But yeah, the diagram itself, huge breakthrough. It let astronomers see patterns, start figuring out how stars, live and die.
It gave structure to the stellar zoo. Before the latest revolution in data, what did a typical HR diagram show us, say, from the Hipparcos mission?
Well, you see the main sequence pretty clearly. That's the big curve where most stars spend their lives, fusing hydrogen, like our sun.
Running from the hot, bright ones down to the cool, dim ones.
Precisely. Then, up and to the right, you've got the giant stars that have run out of hydrogen in their cores.
Bigger and brighter, but cooler surfaces.
And even above them, the supergiants. Real monsters.
Okay. And then there's that other corner.
Down in the lower left, yeah. The white dwarfs. The endpoints for stars like the sun. Just cooling embers, really. Dense little things.
So that was the basic picture. But then came Gaia. Specifically, its second data release, DR2.
Oh, yeah. Gaia changed the game. We're talking distances, parallaxes for over 1.7 billion stars.
Billion with a B. And super precise distances, right? That's key.
Absolutely key. Parallax is that tiny shift we see when we look at a star from different points in Earth's orbit. Gaia measures that shift with mind-boggling accuracy.
Which means you can figure out how far away the star really is.
And once you know the distance and how bright it looks, you know how intrinsically luminous it is. It's absolute magnitude.
So Gaia DR2 gave us this incredibly sharp, detailed HR diagram, like going from a blurry photo to Ultra HD.
Exactly. Suddenly, features that were hinted at, or maybe just theoretical, started popping out, especially for the fainter stars.
The red dwarfs and the white dwarfs, which is where the real surprises started showing up, and that's our mission for this deep dive.
Right. Let's dig into what Gaia revealed about these stars, starting with those red dwarfs, the M dwarfs.
Okay, M dwarfs. Coolest, faintest stars on the main sequence, bottom right of the diagram. We thought that was a smooth curve, but Gaia found
A gap. A tiny but very distinct break in the sequence.
like a little jump in the data points. Not completely out of the blue, though. Weren't there hints before?
There were. Infrared surveys, like 2MASS, had suggested something might be there. But the Gaia data really nailed it down, made it undeniable.
So why is there a gap? What's physically different about the stars on either side of it?
It seems to be about how energy gets transported inside the star. The really low-mass M dwarfs, below the gap, are thought to be fully convective.
Meaning the whole interior is churning, like a pot of boiling water.
Pretty much. Hot stuff rises, cool stuff sinks, all the way to the core. But slightly more massive M dwarfs, just above the gap, are different.
How so?
They develop a core where energy moves outwards by radiation, like in the sun's interior, and then they have a convective layer on top of that.
Ah, okay. So a structural change. And this transition happens around, what, a third of the sun's mass?
Yeah, roughly 0.35 solar masses seems to be the critical point where this internal structure shifts.
But how does that structural shift create a gap in the number of stars we see at that brightness?
Good question. The theory connects it to nuclear fusion, specifically an intermediate product called helium-3.
Okay.
In the fully convective stars, this helium-3 gets mixed throughout the star, which actually helps the main hydrogen fusion process run more efficiently for a while.
Right. Constant stirring helps the reaction.
Exactly. But as the star transitions towards having that radiative core, the way helium-3 is mixed and used changes. There's a point over a narrow mass range where this transition causes a slight temporary dip in the star's luminosity as it adjusts.
Ah, so the stars kind of hurry through that brightness level as their interiors reorganize, leaving fewer of them sitting right there.
That's the idea. It's a subtle effect tied to the physics of convection and fusion, causing that little dip, that gap in the population.
Wow. Amazing detail from just plotting brightness and temperature. Okay, let's shift focus now. Down to the bottom left, the white dwarfs.
The stellar graveyard. And Gaia delivered some surprises here too. Remember, we now have super accurate distances for tens of thousands of them.
Better than 5% precision on the parallax for many, right? Which means really good absolute magnitudes.
Exactly. So when you plot these high-precision white dwarfs on the HR diagram, structure emerges. The most obvious thing is a very clear, tight sequence. Let's call it sequence A.
And that sequence matches.
It lines up perfectly with the theoretical cooling tracks for DA white dwarfs.
DA meaning?
Meaning their atmospheres are dominated by hydrogen. So sequence A is basically the main cooling pathway for hydrogen atmosphere white dwarfs.
Okay, that makes sense. But there was another sequence, wasn't there? Slightly below A.
Yes, sequence B, also quite distinct. And this one matches the cooling tracks for DB white dwarfs.
Which have helium atmospheres.
Correct. So Gaia is clearly separating these two main atmospheric types directly on the HR diagram. People had seen hints of this using colors from other surveys like Sloan, but never this clearly on the main HR plot.
And the fact that these sequences are so tight, so narrow, that tells us something too.
It does. It confirms that most white dwarfs are born with very similar masses, clustering quite strongly around 0.6 times the mass of the Sun.
Consistent results there. What about the few white dwarfs that seem to lie above the main sequence A?
Ah, good point. The most likely explanation for those is that they came from binary systems. Interactions between the two stars, maybe mass transfer, can mess with the standard evolutionary path and leave a white dwarf that looks a bit different, maybe puffier or hotter for its stage.
Okay, so we have hydrogen white dwarfs, helium white dwarfs, maybe some binary products. But there was another feature, right? Something fainter.
Yes, the really intriguing one. A faint, almost transverse band cutting across the main cooling sequences. They labeled it Q.
Q, what on earth causes that? It's not another atmospheric type, is it?
No, something much more fundamental is going on inside. The explanation, which came shortly after the data release, points to core crystallization.
Crystallization? You mean the inside of the white dwarf is solidifying, like turning into a giant diamond, kind of?
Well, not exactly diamond, but yes, solidifying. The core is an incredibly dense plasma of carbon and oxygen nuclei swimming in a sea of electrons. Theory predicted decades ago, back in the 60s, that as it cools and the pressure mounts, this plasma should undergo a phase transition.
From a fluid to a solid crystal lattice.
Exactly. And like water freezing into ice, this process releases energy, latent heat.
Ah, latent heat. So as the core crystallizes, it releases extra heat.
It does. And that extra heat temporarily slows down the white dwarf's cooling.
Okay, I think I see. So sequence Q is where this happens. The stars sort of pause their cooling for a bit as they release this crystallization energy.
Precisely. They pile up at that particular stage of brightness and temperature because the crystallization process, releasing latent heat, makes them linger there longer than they otherwise would.
And this matches the theory.
Beautifully. The location of sequence Q on the HR diagram, its brightness and color, is exactly where theory predicts. This latent heat release should become significant across the typical range of white dwarf masses. It's a mass-dependent effect, creating that band.
That's incredible. So Gaia is showing us direct evidence of stellar cores freezing over. Physics we absolutely cannot replicate here on Earth.
That's right. It's a confirmation of theories about matter under extreme densities, conditions far beyond any lab experiment. A first-order phase transition in a high-density Coulomb plasma seen in the sky.
Mind-blowing. And how long does this take for, say, our sun?
Well, the sun becomes a white dwarf in about 5 billion years. Then it'll take maybe another 5 billion years of cooling before its core starts to crystallize like this.
So a 10 billion year process from now. Wow. It really makes you appreciate the long view.
Absolutely. Imagine Hertzsprung and Russell seeing this, seeing these subtle details emerge from the data, revealing physics they could only dream of testing.
It's just fantastic. So recapping the aha moments from this deep dive, we've got that unexpected gap among the dimmest red dwarfs, telling us about their internal convection and fusion tweaks.
Right, a change in the plumbing, essentially.
And then down at the white dwarfs, we see the clear separation of hydrogen and helium atmospheres, confirming their typical mass, and crucially, this faint band, Q.
Which is the signature of their cores, literally crystallizing, releasing heat, and pausing their cooling journey. Direct evidence for exotic physics.
It really drives home how powerful the HR diagram still is, especially when fed with data of this quality and quantity. We're peeling back layers on stellar evolution that were invisible before.
And understanding these details, these life cycles, from birth through the main sequence to these final white dwarf stages, it deepens our whole picture of the cosmos.
It absolutely does. And it leaves you wondering, doesn't it? With Gaia still observing and future missions planned, what other subtle clues are buried in the data?
What other fundamental physics is just waiting for us to find the right way to look?
Exactly. What other surprises are lurking out there that could shift our understanding all over again? Something to keep thinking about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.